this Arthritis and Emergency Preparedness webinar. I'm Robyn Tui, I'm an arthritis educator with Arthritis New Zealand. I have Chris, who's an emergency management advisor with me, and together we're going to say hi.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon.
And together we're going to be talking about preparedness before an emergency and how we can help you when you have arthritis to ensure that you are as well prepared as you can be prior to an emergency. So why get prepared? Well, firstly, it increases personal protection. It can help minimise and reduce your injury and also damage to your house and perhaps to yourself if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. It also builds confidence and knowledge so that you're confident about what you can do beforehand and during and what sort of hazards that you're going to be facing during an emergency. It also enhances response and recovery so that you can get through the disaster or the emergency in the best shape possible. And in this way, it helps to promote resilience and adaptation to change. So what do we gain by getting prepared? As I said, knowledge about what to do in an emergency, and Chris is going to be dealing with that shortly. It helps to reduce the negative impacts of the emergency, both physically and emotionally, so that we get through and feel that we can cope with the other challenges that happen after an emergency. So it does help to improve your recovery, and if perhaps you're more vulnerable with mobility, it helps to maintain your independence so that you're not going to be negatively affected. And then we can also help with regards to people with arthritis. You can also help to assist others during and after an emergency. So you've got a lot of skills managing health, perhaps life experience that you can contribute to your community, which will help make your community more resilient. So what are the key tasks for being prepared? And Chris is going to talk through his amazing go bag in a moment, but it helps us to know more about our local hazards, what protective actions to take, and planning ahead. Thanks, Chris.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess before we learn about how to get prepared, it's always good to know why we need to prepare. So as you can see on the slide there in New Zealand, we have a number of hazards that we face, no matter where you live. So, if you're here in Wellington or pretty much anywhere in New Zealand, you're always vulnerable to earthquakes just because we do sit on the plate boundary between the Australian and Pacific plate. And then also we have a lot of volcanoes around the country. So we've got Mount Egmont, Mount Ruapehu, the Auckland volcanic fields. So those are another big hazard that we face. And then because it's such a coastal community, we face, most of our cities are on the coastline. So we do have that constant threat of tsunamis, that longer term threat of sea level rise, as well as flooding. So just quickly before we get started as well on looking at the grab bag, there's some protective actions that you can take in the immediate event of some of these disasters. So for the example of an earthquake, the standard messaging around New Zealand is drop, cover, hold. So that means drop down, cover yourself, preferably your head and back of your neck, and hold on. Obviously we realise that some people are unable to do that. So if you are able to drop, cover, hold under a table or a desk or a chair, the best thing to do is try to protect the back of your head and your neck. So if you're sitting in a chair, just tuck over like you do on an airplane, protect the back of your head and neck. Otherwise, if you're in bed, just put a pillow over your head. It might seem like the wrong thing to do, but the reality is, protecting your head with a pillow is going to stop those small things that you might not have locked down from falling on your head. And then as well, after a long earthquake in New Zealand, our messaging is long or strong, get gone. So if there is an earthquake that's longer than a minute or so strong that knocks you to the ground, it is a good sign that there could potentially be a tsunami coming after the earthquake. So long or strong, get gone means just make your way to higher ground immediately after the shaking stops.
Chris, can I just ask a question about protective actions during earthquake?
Yeah.
Should you move to a doorway or move against a wall?
So that's a good question. So with doorways, older houses, the doorway was built into the structure of the house. So because of that, it was a stronger and safer place to be in terms of that, if the rest of the house was maybe falling or crumbling, the doorway would stay standing. But in newer houses, it's not built in the same, so it's not as safe to go into doorways these days. As well as that, if you're standing in a doorway and you've got your hands against the door will slap and jam your fingers, so it's not the safest place to be. But in terms of going against inside walls, that is a good option. Get against the inside wall, just protect your head and neck, and just wait for the shaking to stop. It's also really important to note that try not to move around while the ground is shaking. It's best to stay put. protecting the back of your head and neck.
Yeah, I think that staying put rather than trying to move to another part of the room is a really important message for people perhaps whose balance or more at risk of falls is a concern. So better to stay put, is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
And then wherever you are and cover your head that way?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, one of the least safest places to be during an earthquake is trying to get out of the front door of any building. So it's definitely safe to try to stay inside. Yeah.
Thanks.
So what I'm going to show you now is I've actually brought my own grab and go bag from work. So a grab and go bag is something that's effectively a bag, about this size, that's got everything that you need in it for straight after a disaster. So this is kind of your kit that you'll have in case, you're out and about in your car for the day, or you're at work, or you're at home, you need to leave the home quickly. This bag could potentially have everything that you need for those first few hours, maybe even days after an event. So I'm just going to quickly run through what I have in my own grab and go bag from my desk. It's important. So this bag that I have here, you can buy these online at getprepared.nz. They're about $85. Otherwise, feel free to. We have a template on our website at Get Prepared as well, which kind of outlines the most important things to have in a grab and go bag. So you can build your own as well. Cool. So. Oh yeah. Sorry, make it bigger really quickly. Cool. Yeah. So the first thing and most important thing, obviously, to have in a grab and go bag is some water bottles filled up with water, as well as some food. So this is just my own food from work that I had for myself after a disaster. It's really important. So it's important to think like how long you might be away from home for. So if you are far away in your car from work, or you're at work and you get yourself home, it's important to have enough food and water in there to last you before you're able to get yourself back home and start using your emergency food supplies that you have stored. Another thing that's in here that's really cool and really nifty is this 4-in-1 torch. So this torch, this little device is a torch, a radio, and a phone charger. So you can charge. It should know you do have to crank it up though to use the torch and the radio and the phone charger. So maybe as an alternative option, Robyn has a phone bank, which is really good as well.
It's very thin and lightweight. And
it's important to keep those charged as well if you are going to be using one of those. Yeah. So there's some other things in here. So we have a lot of the things that I'm going to show you now are standard template from this grab and go bag. So if you buy the kit, it will come with the majority of the stuff in here, apart from obviously my food. But yeah, so this is some working gloves in case you do dig out some rubble. There's dust masks, just because with a lot of disasters that we do have in here in New Zealand, just say an earthquake, afterwards, buildings collapse, there could be a lot of dust around, so it's just important to keep yourself safe with this dust mask too. There are glow sticks, so disasters don't sleep, so they might happen at night. So if that's the case, it's important to have not only your wind-up torch, but these are some glow sticks that you can use after an event just to keep yourself light, so you can see where you're going. Same deal with the weather. Disaster might happen on a really bad, really cold day, so these kits do come with emergency rain ponchos to keep yourself dry. But it's also important to note that it's always good to have like a thicker rain jacket in here, and it can fit. So if you did want to add an extra rain jacket, that's also a good idea. It comes with a little first aid kit as well, and it's just kind of got bandages and those sorts of things. It is really important if you do require medication to keep extra medical supplies in here. A couple of days worth is a really good idea, as well as maybe a copy of a prescription if you can do that. We understand that some people can't get copies of their prescription medications, but it's a really good idea to have a photocopied version of that in here as well. There's a little shovel in case you have to dig yourself out of somewhere, I suppose. And there's also a hazardous vest. So, if, walking yourself home is a reality for lots of parts of New Zealand after big disasters, just because of access and issues with driving. So it's always good to wear a hazardous vest when you're walking yourself home, just so people can see you. And the last thing that's in here is a little bag, which is I've built the majority of this stuff in here. So the kit itself does come with a little notebook and a pen, just so you can take notes on what you're seeing, because it's really important that once you get to a local community, disaster centre, which we'll talk about in a second, to have notes of what you've seen, so you can inform the rest of your community on what you have seen walking there. It's really important as well to have photocopied versions of any sort of identification that you have. So personally, I have a photocopied version of my driver's license, as well as somewhere I have a copy or one of my business cards. It's just a good way to ID yourself, as well as This has got my phone numbers and everything on it. People do need to be in contact with anyone related to me. One thing that people do forget about that's really important as well is having cash, because if there's no power, you can't use your EFTPOS card. So just having a little bit of cash, I've got $25 in mine, just having a little bit of cash is a really good idea as well, in case you do have to buy some food or water on the way home. We've got a phone charger that's just, you need it for the torch for that to work and to charge your phone that way. We've got a whistle and a compass in here as well, just a little emergency kind of thing that's really useful in case you are trapped, whistle, loud noise, that's always useful. We've got a pack of cards, so not only should a grab and go bag have things you need, it should have a couple of things that you want, just because, if the reality is that this is all you have to live with for a few days, you might start going a bit crazy if you haven't got something there to sort of keep yourself entertained. So there's a pack of cards in this one, just a sort of a little bit of fun that you can do for those first few days. There's an emergency blanket, so this is just to keep yourself warm after an event as well, really useful. Here is some bags, so these can be used, for toilet. If you need to go to the toilet after an event, this is a good idea, just have a few plastic bags in there to use, just to keep, stop disease spreading and those sorts of things. And the last two things in here is there's waterproof matches. They're really good, useful as well to keep yourself warm if you do need to use a fire or start a fire, anything like that, as well as just a Swiss Army knife. Really useful tool. Everyone should probably have one in their grab and go bag if they can.
That is an amazing amount of
Things.
safety things to have in such a small bag.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, as you're saying, all that's available as a grab and go bag purchase.
Yeah.
But if somebody was wanting to make their own bag, like for example, where would you get the glow sticks from?
So the reality is, we tell people to, if they have to make their own, just to buy the cheaper options of things, because we hope that you don't need to use this once, maybe not at all, which would be a dream. Buying online is always a good idea. I have friends that have bought things off, websites such as AliExpress or Amazon, where you can just buy cheaper versions of things, because, you don't need to be buying like a $20, $30 emergency blanket when you can buy one for a couple of dollars and save yourself that bit of money, especially if you don't have to use it once. A lot of things are available at places like the Warehouse and Kmart and Supermarket too.
And outdoor.
Yeah, outdoor supplies. Bunnings, Maratea, any place like that will have Swiss Army knives and whistles and those sorts of things. So that's everything that I have in mind. There are a few things that I have missed from mine, I've actually found something else. This is a sanitation tablet, so after an event, water might not be safe to drink straight from the tap, so having something that you can use to purify water is a really good idea. These come in the kit as well. So I have missed a few things. Walking shoes is always a good idea. Lots of people just use an old pair of running shoes and just sit them in there, just because, a lot of people might not wear comfortable shoes to work or driving around, so it's a really good idea to have comfortable shoes to walk yourself or wherever you need to go in. As well, it's really important to just, reiterate that if you do require medication, it's really important to have, your medication and potentially a copy of your prescription script in here as well. Yeah.
So how much would that weigh? Because one of the things that perhaps people get concerned about is weight and heavy items, but it looks to me like...
so the water is definitely going to be the heaviest part of all this. The reality is it's not too heavy, probably a couple of kgs. You don't want to start putting in, obviously, you wouldn't want to store like a 10-litre water bottle in here and a bunch of food, because you're probably not going to need that much and it will make it that much heavier. I think 1 litre of water stored as a kg for your bag. So I'll put about a litre of water in here. But the reality is it probably only weighs a couple of kgs, just because you're saying a lot of things in here are quite light and versatile.
So what do you think about using a small cabin bag on wheels? Is that, what's your view on that? If people don't feel like they can carry it with their hands.
It's always a secondary option. I would definitely recommend having one that you can carry, just because if you're having to drag it along the ground, there's like debris and rubble and everything like that, it might be a bit tougher to sort of lug it around. But if you are able to carry a heavier bag, I would definitely use them.
And it's got shoulder straps, so it's not, you're not using your hands, you're using your shoulders.
It's just a little backpack. And as I said, you can buy this kit, apart from obviously my cash and my food, off Get Prepared and getprepared.nz, and it's about $85. Otherwise, you can make your own.
Okay.
Cool.
So that's the
Yeah. So
hubs.
while I do this, I will keep.
So we've got our bag and we're wanting to find out more information.
Yep.
So where do we go?
Yeah, for sure. So what I should know before I talk about community emergency hubs is it's different everywhere around New Zealand. So in Wellington here, we have community, we call them community emergency hubs, and it's a place to gather and get information and support after an event. But it's important to note that, different areas around the country do name these different things, and they are slightly, they do work in slightly different ways as well. Like I know some areas in New Zealand call them civil defence centres, or others call them community-led centres. So if you aren't in the Wellington region, I definitely recommend jumping on your local civil defence website and just having a look at what they're called and where your local one is. And I think we will have a slide later on that shows a link to all the civil defence pages. So just click the one that you do and it should show you where your local centre is. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what community emergency hubs are, just because it will give you a bit of an understanding of how sort of that community response works here in Wellington and other parts of New Zealand. So effectively what a community emergency hub is a place to go after a disaster where you can get help and support from your community. So if you get home and you realise that maybe you can't stay at home and you need somewhere to stay, we would hope you would wander down to your local community emergency hub and sort of find help within your community, because there will be people there who will have spare beds and spare places to stay. So it's all about that community helping community. And same thing, like if you get home and you realise that you have a bunch of spare food and water that you might not need for that, to look after yourself, go down to the local community resource hub and just let your community know that you have spare resources, because there will be people out there in your community that just aren't prepared. And that's a reality of living in New Zealand. A lot of people don't prepare themselves for disasters, even though we should be more aware, because we do live in a very active country. And so, the community emergency hub is really a place to facilitate that sharing of resources and information.
So, for example, if somebody's perhaps got a gas barbecue but don't know how to use it, or not wanting to use it, so to go down and say, someone can come down and pick this up. Or,
exactly, that's a good example. Yes, that's a really good, example. So if you have a gas barbecue, you might not use it, you might not have enough gas to use it. Just linking it up, so maybe go down to your local community emergency hub, let them know that you have a barbecue, and you might have some food to cook on the barbecue, you might still have gas and someone to cook it, so it's kind of linking those things up in the community. Definitely.
And likewise, you might be, as you're saying about food, somebody might have a really well stocked deep freezer, and there's no way they're going to be able to get through that food in time before it goes off. So
definitely, so it's a really good idea, definitely to let people know. And I mean, I should know that this is a primarily in Wellington where we do quite a good, quite a strong community response. Other places, you might head down to your local civil defence centre, or just place to gather after an event, and they might get a bit more official support at those locations. But here in Wellington, just because of the isolation, especially, the reality is that communities will have to look after themselves for those first 7 days. So we do ask people to be prepared and help look after themselves and help the community, especially for those first 7 days. And I also should note that while we say 7 days of preparedness here in Wellington, some places around the country do say 3 days. So it's also important to just kind of check out on your local civil defence page whether, just how long you're expected to store your emergency supplies for, as well as just what your local community emergency hub's called.
Chris, can I just add about sharing resources?
Sure.
It's great to think about the resources that can be shared. So not only the practical food items, there might well be some people who perhaps need that physical assistance.
Definitely.
So they've got the resources of food and products to provide, but they need the help perhaps with regards to protecting their joints, or they're not strong enough to look after themselves or their property. That's a reciprocal sharing, isn't it?
It definitely is.
A lot of people, from my experience, don't like to ask for help because they want to do it themselves. But when you put it into the context of I'm sharing these resources in the community, someone else can give back in a different way.
Definitely. And definitely. It's not all about just sharing resources in these places. It's sharing skills and knowledge and support as well. So if you maybe if you get home and you have a bookshelf that's fallen over, that's trapping access someplace in your house and you can't lift it up, head down to the hub. Your community can help you get that bookshelf back up and running, as well as if you need just a place to go and sit with your community and just talk to people, head down to the hub. It's a good place just to meet your community.
Having that listening ear is so valuable, and some people have the skill, have the time, and that's their passion. So really great to use those talents.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we have 127 hubs in the Wellington area, so you can, same thing, you can go onto our getprepared.nz website and just sort of see where your local one is for the Wellington area. Same thing with other, you know, if you live elsewhere in New Zealand, do head to your local civil defence page and just have a look at where your local, you know, centre is for that post-disaster response. Yeah, definitely. I think we have a slide of some images of, you know, so of just what happens at the hub. So here in Wellington at the hubs, we do have, so the top left photo is a photo of our community hub kit, as well as some map tubes. So in our hubs, there is some basic startup equipment to sort of help facilitate that community response, as well as like area maps and, you know, a little first aid kit and those sorts of things that will be there to help you to start it. As well as a really cool thing about our community emergency hubs in Wellington is that there is a link to the official response there, so through that radio. So each emergency hub has a VHF radio. So if there is something that you urgently need that maybe we can't support you with, you can always try radio into the local, you know, official response and try and get support that way as well. And then we have photos of just examples. So we run community emergency hub exercises here in Wellington, which is just a simulation. We get communities along to sort of see how the hub runs and how they would operate it. And those are just two photos there of, you know, communities coming together and working together at their hub. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next bit. So we're talking now more specifically about caring for yourself when you have arthritis. So arthritis symptoms can influence how you're able to prepare, respond and recover from an emergency. So as we said in the beginning, this is really tailoring it to people with specific health needs. So when we think about arthritis, we have symptoms of painful joints, joint stiffness, perhaps difficulties with everyday tasks and activities, and reduced mobility. So that influences our symptoms. Pain is one of the big things that influence symptoms as well. And some of the other aspects of pain comes from our emotions. So, you know, anxiety or fear, if we've got thoughts or worries, if we're catastrophizing, worrying about the future, behaviours, perhaps overdoing things, perhaps not wanting to be a bother and doing things yourself, stress. So once again, when we think about that in the context of an emergency, then these are some of the big influences that perhaps might turn up or increase your experience of pain. So preparedness in this context is really aimed at reducing and helping to keep stable the symptoms that you've got in your that you're experiencing in the everyday situation. So when we're thinking about being prepared to improve outcomes, we're really talking about thinking about medications, use of heat and cold, joint protection, pacing, prioritising tasks, keeping up regular exercise, and then thinking about those social networks such as family, friends and neighbours. And so Chris and I will just go through these now, bearing in mind we're talking about managing and improving outcomes. So medications, really important to know what medications you have. And as Chris said, having the medication list in your go bag. Some people also keep it in their wallet, and that just gives them an up-to-date script of what's happening for their medications and knowing what they're for. So it's recommended that there's a 7-day supply that you keep.
Yeah. It's just around that whole like standard preparedness thing of trying to prepare yourself those 7 days. Yeah.
And making sure that they are up to date. And I know that you can get blister packs, and some people perhaps may store a blister pack in their go bag as a routine option, but making sure that that blister pack and the medications that you've got in your go bag are rotated and kept up to date. Check with your pharmacist with regards to storage of medications, so that we know that people with autoimmune arthritis conditions will have to refrigerate some of their medications and how to manage that. So having that refrigerator bag with cold packs to ensure that they stay as cool as possible, but also know that perhaps some of the medications that perhaps have come up to room temperature, how long you can have them at room temperature and still know that they're going to be safe and effective to use. But really that's quite specific, and I think important to check with your pharmacist as to how best to manage that. The next approach to managing pain is use of heat and cold. So what happens in a power cut when we, our trusty wheat bag or electric blanket, which is giving us such relief during the day and night, what do we do when we've got, a cold winter's night and no power? So a hot water bottle is good. So if you do have one, check that it hasn't perished and it's not going to leak. But that's another option, especially if you've got perhaps a gas supply. You may not have, if it's a power supply out, of course you can't heat your water, but if you've got gas supply, use your gas barbecue to heat up some water. If you haven't got a hot water bottle and you're still desperate for heat, I've had people suggest using a plastic bottle. So of course you wouldn't be able to have the water as hot, but you'd certainly get some warmth and comfort from using a plastic bottle. So that's another option to think about.
There's another option for heat. You can buy those little heat pads, can't you?
Oh, yes.
And it kind of just heats your hands up.
Yep.
If you can't boil water or anything, that could be another option.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that you can get them, you're right, you can get them about the size of your palm.
Yeah.
And so even if you're out walking and you've got freezing hands, you can use it in the everyday. So what we're talking about here is not specifically only for an emergency situation, but just getting the best out of what you can do in the everyday as well. Another important aspect of managing joint pain is joint protection. So there are a lot of gadgets and devices, and you can see on the screen that there's some images of some different items. So if we're thinking about storage of food, we've got can openers. Please try and have a can opener if you're relying on an electric can opener and there's no power, then that's going to be an issue to open those can lids. And so thinking about wider gripped can openers are going to help with joint strain. So rather than those cheaper item can openers, which are a little bit fiddly and put a lot of joint strain on your small finger joints, try and think of using something that's got a wider grip. The other thing, another option is using cans with the pull tab. So you can see in the image, and I've got one here, and this is called a can key. And so it's a bit like a big J, and the point of it can hook underneath the ring tab, and you can use your larger part of your arm to manoeuvre and pull open the lid. So that's another good option. Got a jar key here, so that pulls the suction on screw top lids. So just about a millimetre tilt, and you pop the suction of the lid so it can open really easily. On the context of opening up items and handling things, this is non-slip mat, which you can buy various places, and it just reduces the friction on anything that you're gripping. So for example, turning the lid on a jar, picking something up, even the doorknob, if you've got round doorknobs and that is hard for you to manage, then having something like this can make a big difference. This is a more customized product which enables you to put the jam jar or the jar at the base with the grip, and then you've got grip as well on top. So, but there's plenty of thin non-slip mat that you can adapt yourself. There's also a wonderful walking stick that's very compact, and I was just talking with Chris before, saying that this could go into a go bag if you had mobility concerns. So just to show you how well it magic. So very useful and safe, and it can be height adjusted as well. So that just provides perhaps that confidence with walking. If there's uneven ground outside, you don't have to worry that you might fall over, or it reduces your falls, because certainly uneven ground is going to put people more at risk of having a fall if there's not that, if you haven't got something to use to keep yourself stable. Even an alpine walking stick. So have a think about what's around to use that as a way of feeling stable. So,
And just before we move on, a lot of these items are really essential. So you need to buy some for your emergency supplies. Whereabouts could you get them from? Can you buy them from supermarkets or?
You can buy them from a range of places. So there's a lot of mobility centres around the whole country. So if you Googled mobility centre and your area, it would come up with the closest area.
Okay, cool.
But having said that, these items you can find in different stores. So the $2/$5 shop, all the supermarkets will have the jar key, I'm pretty sure. So the non-slip mat you can buy from homeware stores, Briscoes. So yeah, there's a lot of places, but often going to a mobility centre or Googling to see what's available, then you know what to look for when you're out and about.
Awesome. Yeah, because the grab and go bag's all about like tailoring it to your wants and needs. So if you do require these sorts of items, it would be really important to have a couple of those things in there. Yeah,
definitely.
Sure.
And just, it's not joint protection, but just adding to your go bag is food hygiene. So being really careful, especially if somebody's on immunosuppressant drugs, then their risk of infection is higher. So being really careful about food preparation, food hygiene. So maybe having some of those really thin latex gloves for food handling, maybe even having the hand gel, keeping infection down. And great that you were talking about the dust masks. So once again, if people are feeling more vulnerable with regards to respiratory problems, so that's joint protection. And so pacing and prioritising is another aspect that can increase joint pain as well. So, of course, during an emergency, perhaps we might be overdoing it and thinking about whether we can pace and prioritise so that we don't have that sort of large burst of activity and then getting a lot of pain. So in the aftermath, going down to the community hub, perhaps to see what's going on, inform people about how you are, what resources you can give. Perhaps there's that opportunity of asking for help so that you're not overdoing it yourself and causing that joint strain.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we realise that, especially for people that are more vulnerable, like creating a bit of a personal support network for those people that live near you is a really important and a really good thing to do before an emergency in terms of your preparedness. Just because like especially these days, where you can get in your car in your garage and drive through your driveway and not actually interact with your neighbours at all. A really important thing for sort of building that community resilience is just getting to know your neighbours. So, bringing them over for a barbecue, a dinner, hosting a bit of a block party. It's all really good ideas just to, get to know the people that live in the street, because the reality is they're going to be the first, point of support for you if you are at home during a disaster. So, making them aware that maybe you do have a vulnerability, or maybe someone on the street is a bit more vulnerable, and, just reaching out to people around you.
That's great, thanks. Another important aspect of caring for yourself during an emergency is if it's going on for a while, perhaps the regular exercise that you've been doing, because that is one of the number one recommendations to manage arthritis pain, is to think about ways that you can still exercise. Perhaps you can't get down to your local class or pool or whatever you were doing on a weekly basis, to think about what sort of exercise you can do safely in your own home. So that might be walking around the house, maybe if it's safe, outside the house, doing range of movement exercises. So this is just safe movement, just to get your joints and tendons and ligaments still moving without feeling that you're going to get pain because you haven't done those types of exercise. And then there's strength and balance as well. So our Arthritis New Zealand website has got a range of resources that you can access, and you perhaps download or make a note of what things you can do if you couldn't get out of the house, but you could still keep exercising quite safely. Then the final thing is having a supportive family, friends and neighbours. So knowing that you've got that support, as Chris was saying, as you were saying, to help, because it's that stress and worry and anxiety that can really turn up pain and create more stress because of it. So using the resources that you have and knowing how to contact them and where to go for help is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just really important to realize that probably your neighbours will be your first point of support after a disaster. So, getting to them now, it's going to be a lot less awkward than if you had to go after a disaster like toilet paper or something. Just breaking that barrier before the disaster is what's a really good idea. Yeah.
And as we said earlier, the role of life experience, coping with health challenges, can make a big difference to how well people can cope afterwards. And so sharing those experiences, being down at the hub, providing that listening ear, perhaps those life skills or work skills that you've had if you're an older adult, you can really pull into action.
Because one thing we do try to push is that the hub, every person will have an important role to play. Right. Everyone has some form of experience or skill or knowledge, whether it's just going down to the hub and being a listening ear, people that just need to talk to someone. Yeah. Everyone can play a role in that community response. Yeah, for sure.
That's great. So the final slide is just a summary of ways, what we've been talking about this morning or this afternoon about getting prepared. So Chris has outlined that knowledge about what to do in an emergency, and it will give us that improved ability to cope during and after the emergency, and increasing our resilience as well, so that we have that confidence and go-to understanding about what we can do. And then thinking about how it can reduce our physical injury. I mean, really, really important that we're thinking about keeping safe as well. And then that has an impact on how well our independence is afterwards, so that we get through and manage our arthritis without it making a bigger impact on our lives. And then afterwards, being able to assist others during and after the emergency. So we've kept repeating how important our community is, and that really is one of the biggest contributors to resilience, if we've got a strong community, and we all are part of that, so we have a big role. There's no one to be left out.
Definitely, Let's realise, communities that stay together, stay connected, speak with a common voice, they definitely are the ones that recover strongest after disasters.
Yeah. And as we just said, the skills that you offer, your knowledge, your experience, your support will make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the end of the webinar. We've got just some images up here. I don't know if you recognise any of those.
Yeah, I see the Student Volunteer Army there, and we've got one of our Civil Defence emergency water tanks. And Stan, the Civil Defence dog as well. Yeah. So preparedness is for everyone. I mean, I love the one with the preschoolers being taught about the turtle. So that's covering. So in a little ball on the floor. Yeah. So we need to be. It's really important to be inclusive throughout the whole of the different age groups. So there's the active adults, there's the less active, and this webinar really is focusing on making sure that everybody's included in a preparedness plan, which we hope will help you get through. Yeah, for sure. I guess one last thing, so that's all the links to all the websites for all the different kind of civil defence groups around the region. So for wherever you live, I think you can just click on that link and head there. If you do struggle sort of using websites and trying to email people, feel free. We have phone numbers, so you can just call us and get in touch with your local group, and they'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. We're always more than happy to take questions around anything to do with preparedness, disasters, those sorts of things. So do feel free to get in touch.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Chris.
It's all good. It's been great. Thank you for having me.